Apprenticeship, Learning to Love, Serve, and Be Like Jesus with Rebecca and Douglas Pereira.
Hello, and welcome to the Apprenticeship. I'm Christopher, and I'm learning from my parents, Rebecca and Douglas Pereira, how to love, serve, and be like Jesus. We do that by following the apprentice's creed. It says you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Love others as well as you love yourself. But what does it mean to love God like that? How do you do it? Today, Rebecca and Douglas will begin answering these questions. I'm sure we'll all learn something fresh. As always, there is a study guide for today's episode. I hope you'll check it out on our website or by scanning the QR code. If you've used it before, then you know it's a great resource for both individual study and small groups. Why not start a small group of your own, an apprentice community where you can all learn and grow together? I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Apprenticeship.
In His Footsteps.
Welcome back to the Apprenticeship. We are excited to continue through the Gospel of Luke with you.
Today's story takes place right after 12-year-old Jesus remained behind in the temple at the end of Passover. You can find the story in Luke chapter 2, verses 51 to 52. Let's have our friend Chisam Okudiri read it for us today.
Then he returned to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. And his mother stored all these things in her heart. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and all the people.
Today's memory verse shows that Jesus grew holistically. During this time, Jesus modeled what it means to be fully human at any stage in life, to be what God designed humanity to be.
Luke described 4 areas of development during this time: wisdom, stature, God, and man.
Wisdom is not only knowledge, it is knowing how to use knowledge. Wisdom goes hand in hand with discernment. This is how Jesus' wisdom developed.
King Solomon, renowned for his wisdom, wrote, "Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment." Jesus' growth in wisdom included his spiritual and moral growth as well.
When Luke says Jesus grew in stature, he means just what you would expect. Jesus grew up physically. But I believe it is implied that Jesus took care of his physical body. I believe Jesus was a picture of health.
It really highlights how God cares about our development. He wants us to be fully developed, to be healthy and robust and prepared in every single way.
Jesus' favor with God reveals that he nurtured and deepened his relationship with God. Like us, it was something he pursued and prioritized. Later in his ministry, we will see concrete examples of how he did that.
Finally, growing in favor with man implies that Jesus lived as harmoniously as possible with people in all his various roles as human, son, brother, neighbor, and citizen. He sought to honor others. He sought their good.
Jesus set the pattern for holistic growth. I have a way to illustrate this.
I cannot wait to see what you have up your sleeve today, Douglas.
Well, this plant represents our lives and how we grow holistic with Jesus. First, we have wisdom. And let me attach here the word wisdom. Okay? And I have some water as well. Just as water nourishes the plant, knowledge and understanding nourish our minds. Jesus grew in wisdom, and we should do the same. Then we have physical growth. And let me find another one here. Let's use this one. It's beautiful. Physical growth. Proper nutrition and care. And let me see here. Oh, it's here. Proper nutrition and care help plants grow strong and healthy. It helps them to produce good fruit. Just as Jesus took care of his physical body, we should care for our bodies with nutrition, exercise, and rest. Now we have spiritual growth.
It's so interesting.
I need you to exercise your imagination. Pretend this flashlight is what? The sun. Just as plant needs sunlight to drive, we need to turn towards God's light to flourish spiritually. Jesus maintained a close relationship with his heavenly Father, and we should do the same. Now we have social growth. And let me find another one here. Oh, here you are. Let me put this one.
I'm almost inclined to help you here.
You can, no problem. Well, sometimes we need to trim away negative influences and cultivate positive relationships. And let me turn here. Jesus grew in favor with others, and we too should seek to develop health social connections.
Wow. I love this illustration, Douglas. Thank you so much. It memorably shows us what we've been talking about so far.
I challenge each of us to consider which areas we may need to grow in.
In his workshop.
We've been learning what being God's image means. In the big picture, it means that we are God's children, that we are his royal representatives, and that we are his priests.
That's right. Today, we'll look at how we live in God's image. If we could boil it down to one instruction to follow, what that would be?
In Mark chapter 12, Jesus was asked which commandment was the most important. This is an interesting question, especially in light of our discussion. If we're made in God's image, what is the most important commandment for living? Jesus answered, the most important commandment is this. Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength.
Jesus was actually quoting Deuteronomy. It reads, Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. This passage is called the Shema because the first word is Shema. It means listen. Faithful Jews have prayed this passage 2 times a day for centuries. The earliest records of the practice date from the 2nd century BC, but likely they pray it even before them. Even in Jesus' day, Jews were praying this prayer twice a day. It was very familiar to his listeners when he quoted. But perhaps it surprised them that Jesus counted as the most important commandment. We are going to look at what this commandment teaches about living in God's image.
Let's begin with the word Shema. It means more than listen. In Hebrew, to Shema means both to listen and to respond. Shema conveys this concept of listening that leads to doing. So in this passage, we're called to listen and obey what follows.
Before we're giving the commandment, we are reminded of who is giving it. It is coming from the one true God. In fact, the word translated as Lord in this verse shows God's sovereignty over us. So the following commandment comes from our one true sovereign King.
Wow, that certainly gives authority and weight.
That's for sure. Let's pause for a moment and think about what leaders today expect of us. They expect us to pay our taxes, to keep the laws of the land, perhaps to agree with them. What does our sovereign King call us to do? You must love the Lord your God. God's sovereignty, rule, and presence in our lives begin with love. No taxes, no laws, not even explicitly with agreement. God begins with love. Let that sink in for a moment. God's chosen starting point is love. Everything else flows from there.
To love someone, you need to know them. Since we are created in God's image, the best way to understand what that means is to get to know the one who put his image in us.
We cannot will our way to love. We learn our way to love. As we learn about him, we will love him.
Love is intrinsic to God's nature. He isn't just loving, he is love. This is a universal and everlasting fact. It's based on how God talks throughout the Bible, and we see that love is one of his most powerful emotions. But we also see that it isn't just a feeling, it's an action. His work of creation, covenants, deliverance, forgiveness, salvation, all stem from his love.
So, to bring all this together, the commandment to love God is really a call to respond to the love God has shown us, to respond by love him in return.
When God says the starting point is love, he means that it's a place of mutual reciprocal love, beginning first with his love for us.
And that brings us to the natural next question. How do we love him? Deuteronomy answers, with all your heart, all your soul, and all your strength. This is an all-compassing statement. It essentially says to love God with all we are and have. But we want to dig deeper than that.
Since Deuteronomy was written in ancient Hebrew, it would be helpful to get into the Hebrew mind, to understand what they understood by the words heart, soul, and mind. That will give us clues on how to love God.
The ancient Hebrews did not have a word for brain. So when they said heart or laugh, they meant something like combination of how we view our hearts and minds today. The heart kept a person alive, of course, but it was also where thinking, understanding, wisdom, discernment, and decisions happened.
The heart was also the source of emotions, desires, and willpower. And most importantly, it was where a person connected to God. In short, the heart was the center of a person's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual life. This is why Solomon wrote, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." To guard your heart meant to guard your entire self.
So we respond to God's love by learning to think like God thinks, to interpret reality and to make connections like God does. We respond to God's love by learning to focus on what He says is important.
We also respond to God's love by learning to align our willpower with His will, by learning to devote our energies to His purpose for us. We respond to God's love by learning to desire what He desires.
And we respond to His love by growing our relationship with Him and deepening our love for Him.
In short, we love God with all our hearts when we surrender our entire being to Him and His will. Let's talk about loving God with all our souls. Today, we're very influenced by the Greek idea of the soul. It's seen as something separate from our physical bodies that, when we die, continues living somewhere. But that is not how Hebrews saw the soul. The soul was indivisible from the physical body.
The Hebrew word for soul is nephesh. It literally means throat, but it also meant the whole body. In the Bible, a person is a nephesh, a whole, living physical being. To illustrate, here's what Hebrews call a murderer, a nephesh killer. A dead person is a dead nephesh. So, nephesh simply means the entire human body.
So, with that understanding, how do we love God with all our soul or with our nefesh?
Well, we dedicate our entire physical existence to our Creator King. We offer all of our time, talents, resources, whether financial, physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, to God. We surrender to His will and follow Him.
Lastly, we come to loving God with all our strength. The Hebrew word here is mehad, which does not mean strength. A different word means strength. This is the only place where mehad is translated as strength. So, what does mehad mean, Douglas?
It's a very interesting word. We don't have an exact equivalent in English, which is why it is hard to translate here. Mehad means very or much. It is the word God used when He completed creation. He said it was mehad good. So Deuteronomy is telling us to love God with all we have got. We can see the difficulty in translating the word here in this passage.
Essentially, we're told to love God at our fullest capacity, at our greatest excellence, to do our very best in all things for the glory of God, to honor God with literally everything we are and everything we have. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, and with all the excellence that you have. I hope this has given you a good foundation in understanding how God's love for you and your responsive, wholehearted love for Him help you live in His image.
Next time, we will look at how we love our neighbor. Until then, let's remember our key questions. What is God doing in my life? Do I have the courage to be a part of His work? Am I truly willing to join Him in His work of redemption in my life and all around me?
The Rescue Worker.
By the age of 15, Kimberly had already experienced immense trauma and challenges. From an early age, she witnessed domestic violence. She tragically lost her older brothers to gang-related violence. Her father was incarcerated for manslaughter. The chronic stress from her traumatic life affected her mentally, emotionally, and physically. But despite all this, Kimberly was resilient. She persevered in school, She joined the school-based youth services program offered at her school. She began receiving counseling and participating in psychoeducational groups that helped her cope with her trauma. And the groups focus on healthy relationships and social skills have been instrumental in helping her to heal. This continuous support and intervention empower Kimberly to focus more on her overall health, improve her grades, and move towards a better life.
Wow, what a story, Rebecca. This reminds me of how we all need something similar, no matter what our life circumstances are. Just as Kimberly needed ongoing support and care, we need the constant presence and forgiveness of Jesus to overcome our sinful nature, our spiritual struggles, and our painful past. Our relationship with Jesus empowers us to move towards a better life, free of the past and renewed each day with His forgiveness. He sustains us daily, helping us to grow, heal, and become more like Him.
This process is essential to our spiritual well-being. It's also part of our daily rescue experience, which empowers us to rescue others.
Last week, we talked about how we cannot do the work on our own efforts. We need Jesus and all He brings. But there is still work to be done. In participation with Jesus, guided, blessed, and empowered by Him.
I think the work you're talking about is that fancy theological word called sanctification. Is that correct?
That's right, Rebecca.
How about we back up a little bit before sanctification? How about we recap all that takes place before sanctification?
By all means, let's do it.
The moment you accept Jesus as your King and your Savior, what happens? Well, first of all, two things happen. As you turn to Jesus in faith, you turn away from sin. It makes sense, right? Every time we turn to something, we're also turning away from something else. So, accepting Jesus happens at the same time as repentance.
The next thing that happens is you die to self. We have described this as dethroning self from your heart. You no longer live as though you are the center of the universe. You put the rightful center in place in your life, that is your King Jesus.
But even as you die, you are brought to life again, a new life. The Bible uses the phrase born again. You change from being one thing into a completely new and other thing.
Then comes adoption into God's kingdom family. With adoption comes all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities of family members. This is where we begin learning to live and think like we belong in the kingdom family.
But since we are still on earth, we're still prone to sin. But Jesus is our mediator and perfecter. He intercedes on our behalf in heaven, even as He works within us in our total transformation from sinful human to kingdom human.
And that brings us to where the rubber meets the road. This place where we work on our transformation, or rather, where Jesus worked with our participation. This is what theologians call sanctification.
Essentially, it's the process of becoming mature in our identity, purpose, and mission as God's child.
That's right.
We can think of sanctification as a three-part process. It is instant, it is ongoing, and it is final. How is it all of those at the same time? Let us show you. Instant sanctification happens when we accept Jesus. He sets us aside for holy use. We aren't holy yet. We aren't transformed yet. But nevertheless, He sets us aside for His holy purposes.
God sees us as we are, but He also sees us as we can be and what we can do. Instant sanctification is like God looking at us as though we already are what He knows we'll become. Ongoing sanctification is what happens between accepting Jesus and His second coming. It is where we continually grow in our relationship with Jesus, in our character and values, and in our God-given mission.
Ongoing sanctification is where God shapes us into what He already sees in us, to make it our reality too, and to ensure our impact. Finally, there is a complete sanctification. This happens when Jesus returns and we are all changed in the twinkling of an eye and into what God had originally intended. I can hardly wait for that day.
Sanctification is the good news that we are instantly assured of acceptance, adoption, and commission for a holy purpose.
It is also the good news that we aren't left to muddle through life on our own. We spend our lives growing with Jesus, being equipped by Him, sometimes failing, always receiving His forgiveness, learning from our experiences, and persevering ever forward with Him.
Sanctification is the good news that this journey is leading somewhere. It is the leading to complete and perfect transformation, to finally seeing ourselves fully as God sees us and being face to face with Him.
Understanding the process of sanctification leads us to humble reliance on Jesus. But it's also a joyful way to live. We're essentially given permission to be works in progress, assured of His grace, mercy, love, and forgiveness.
This is good news indeed. And experiencing it daily empowers us to share this news with others.
Thank you for joining us today on The Apprenticeship. If you are new to this show, I'm happy to share that you can watch all our episodes thus far. You can find them on our website, through the Hope Channel app, or through Roku. Please check them out. I hope today's episode has blessed you. We'll see you next week on The Apprenticeship.